year 1782, as philosophers across Europe championed reason and human dignity. A Swiss executioner raised his sword above a kneeling woman. Her crime was not witchcraft, nor sorcery, nor any true offense against God or man. Her crime was being inconvenient to powerful men. Anna Göldi was a servant, a mother, a woman whose only transgression was threatening the reputation of those who held her life in their hands. Her execution would mark the last legal witch killing in Europe, a brutal punctuation mark on centuries of systematic persecution that had claimed the lives of tens of thousands. The canton of Glarus in eastern Switzerland seemed an unlikely stage for such medieval barbarism. By 1782, the Age of Enlightenment had been illuminating European thought for decades. Voltaire championed tolerance, Rousseau wrote of natural rights, and across the Atlantic, a new nation was founded on principles of equality and justice. Yet in the shadow of the Swiss Alps, ancient fears and patriarchal power structures remained as immovable as the mountains themselves. The Protestant authorities of Glarus, deeply conservative and suspicious of change, clung to old ways with desperate fervor. Anna had arrived there as a domestic servant, one of countless women who toiled in obscurity to support themselves and their children. Born into poverty around 1734, she had already endured the harsh realities that defined women's lives in 18th century Europe. Unmarried and with a child to support, she existed on society's margins, vulnerable to the whims of employers and the judgment of communities that measured a woman's worth by her compliance and silence. Her literacy was limited, her voice barely heard, in a world where women's testimonies carried little weight in courts dominated by men. The household of physician Johann Jakob Tschudi seemed to offer Anna stability, if not prosperity. Dr. Tschudi was a man of standing in Glarus society, educated and respected, moving in circles where reputation meant everything. His wife presided over their domestic realm with authority, while their young daughter represented the family's future and honor. Into this carefully ordered world came Anna, carrying the invisible burdens of her class and gender. At first, she blended into her role as servant, but soon, innocent circumstances began to turn against her. The Tschudi daughter experienced strange episodes, fits, convulsions, and mysterious ailments that defied the medical knowledge of the time. Medicine was primitive, psychology non-existent, and superstition lingered in the shadows. Such symptoms often triggered desperate searches for supernatural explanations. What began as concern for a child's health spiraled into suspicion and then into accusation. When needles were discovered in the girls' meals, the household's anxiety transformed into something far more dangerous. In the mindset of the time, these needles were not seen as accidents or malicious pranks, but as proof of witchcraft. Anna, as a servant with access to the kitchen, became the obvious suspect. The accusations followed well-worn patterns of centuries of witch persecution. Anna was accused of practicing maleficium, harmful magic against the child. She was painted as a woman who had made a pact with dark forces, using her position in the household to harm the innocent. Though witch trials had become rare across Europe, Glarus still clung to its old laws. Authorities, instead of questioning the absurdity of such claims, embraced them. The trial that followed was a travesty of justice, even by the grim standards of earlier witch persecutions. Anna was interrogated under immense psychological pressure. Torture was still officially banned, but authorities used relentless questioning, intimidation, and the promise of leniency to coerce a confession. At first she denied everything, but the pressure mounted. In courts where silence was seen as guilt and denials as proof of witchcraft, her fate was sealed. Eventually Anna broke. She confessed not because she was guilty, but because survival seemed possible only through compliance. Her words, describing supernatural powers she never possessed, satisfied the judges. They had the confession they needed to justify their verdict. On June 13, 1782, Anna Göldi was led to her execution in beheading, considered merciful compared to burning, was chosen. As she knelt before the executioner's sword, she became the final victim of Europe's witch persecutions. The crowd gathered to witness the spectacle. Some may have doubted her guilt, others rejoiced in the destruction of supposed evil. The executioner, following orders, brought down his blade. Anna's life ended, and with it, an era of darkness. But her death was not forgotten. Anna's execution shocked Europe, to Enlightenment thinkers. It was unthinkable that a woman could still be condemned for witchcraft in the late 18th century. England had held its last witch trial in 1684, France in 1745. Across the continent, reason was replacing superstition, yet in Glarus, the old fears still held sway. The authorities buried Anna in unconsecrated ground, denying her even the dignity of a marked grave. They sought not only to kill her, but to erase her memory. Yet her case echoed through Europe, raising outrage and condemnation. Why had this tragedy occurred so late in history? The answer lay in the fragile position of women like Anna. She was poor, a servant, an unmarried mother, social categories that carried stigma and vulnerability. In the patriarchal society of 18th century Switzerland, such women were easy scapegoats. Anna's persecution was not only about superstition, but about power. Dr. Tschudi, concerned with his family's reputation and authority, had every reason to deflect blame for his daughter's strange illnesses. Accusing a powerless servant was far easier than admitting ignorance or weakness. The legal system, still rooted in medieval precedent, enabled this injustice. Confessions were considered the strongest evidence, even when obtained through coercion. Accusations of supernatural harm were treated as legitimate, and the presumption of guilt hung over the accused like a noose. Anna's case revealed how communities used witch trials as a form of psychological release. When unexplained events caused fear, they sought a scapegoat. Anna, poor and isolated, became the target. Her death restored a false sense of order, even as it marked a profound moral failure. In the years following her execution, whispers of doubt began to circulate. Enlightened voices questioned whether Anna could truly have been guilty. Historians and jurists revisited the case, exposing the weakness of the evidence and the injustice of the trial. By the 20th century, Anna's name became a symbol of wrongful persecution. Historians placed her in the long history of witch hunts that had claimed tens of thousands of lives, mostly women. Feminist scholars highlighted her vulnerability as a poor, unmarried mother. She embodied the way patriarchy weaponized superstition to silence and destroy women. In 2008, over 225 years after her death, the Swiss parliament formally exonerated Anna Göldi. She was declared a victim of judicial murder. Museums, memorials, and cultural works now preserve her story, ensuring that she is remembered not as a witch, but as a woman unjustly killed. Her story is more than history. It is a warning. The same psychological forces that condemned Anna, fear, prejudice, scapegoating, blind faith in authorities, still exist today, in different forms. Societies still target the vulnerable when fear outweighs reason. Anna Göldi's voice was silenced by a sword in 1782, but her story now speaks louder than ever. She is remembered as the last witch of Europe, not because she was guilty, but because she was innocent and because her death marked the end of centuries of fear-driven violence. Her legacy reminds us of the price of injustice and the need for eternal vigilance against the abuse of power. Anna did not die for sorcery. She died because her society failed her, and in remembering her, we promise never to let such injustice happen again.